There's a change to the look of tomorrow night on BBC One. Plotting against a corrupt regime, Robert Redford heads the cast in Havana. That's at 11:40.
As a transsexual, I'm very lucky because I've got very good legs.
Meet Jackie, 28. She stays up late at night.
People think you can easily go out on the street, but they don't realise it's not easy to sleep with men you don't know, you know. And if I don't have a good drink before I go out, I cannot do it. It's taken me a long time to get to where I am. I'm not frightened of people anymore. I'm not frightened of what people say or what people think of me. I'm a prostitute. It's my business to earn money.
Meet the people of Paddington Green, tomorrow at 9:30 on BBC One.
You're lost behind enemy lines.
This is Bravo 20, over!
Your radio is out. You're surrounded, outgunned and outnumbered. What do?
Go, go, go!
Sean Bean in Bravo 20.
Whoever your God is, you'll need him now.
Concludes tomorrow at 10 on BBC One.
Well, now on BBC One, before BBC News 24, a late-night look at the weather with Helen Young.
Hello. Well, we've already got another spell of stormy weather with us for the rest of the night and into Monday. It's all down to this area of low pressure, and if we take a look at the winds, you can see just how strong they're going to be by those large wind arrows there, particularly across northern areas of Britain. By the end of the day, I think through the English Channel there will be some windy weather as well. Now, the main risk of disruption due to those winds will be across Northern Ireland, Scotland and Northern England, where gusts of wind could get up to around 70 miles an hour, particularly during the first part of Monday, and that means for the rush hour we could see some pretty treacherous weather, not good for driving back to work. Now, during the night we've already seen the rain coming in from the west. That'll clear away as we go through to dawn, but down in the south it will stay, I think, fairly cloudy with some drizzle, so temperatures here with the wind will stay up around 10 to 11. Further north, well, they're around 4 to 6. During Monday the weather front stays in the south of Britain, and that means more wet weather to come here, particularly in the afternoon. Further north there'll be plenty of showers, especially in western Scotland, and they will be very squally showers accompanied by gale force winds. By day, temperatures in the south will be higher than normal, around 11 to 13, but when you've got those winds it's still going to be feeling cool there as well. Bye for now.
Get the action from the third day's play of the 5th Test from Sydney. Test Match Special is on Radio 4 Longwave now.
Christmas left you short? Then look no further than BBC One.
Money for Old Rope has a rather attractive proposition for you.
Turn your trash into cash.
I'm looking for buried treasure.
With the programme you can't afford to miss. Money for Old Rope, Wednesday 7 o'clock on BBC One.
Amazing!
Now on BBC One, we join BBC News 24, meeting the people whose lives have changed forever. May Blood is a face in the crowd.
A lot of the time of the Shankill Butchers, the time of the Bobby Sands, the whole hunger strike, we worked closely together, Protestant and Catholic, within the factory in those days, and we supported each other. Back in 1968, when the Civil Rights March occurred and there was trouble in it, I can remember saying to my father, you know, what this was about, and he was explaining it was over discrimination in housing. And I have to say that we lived in the most appalling conditions, and my next door neighbour was a Catholic and they lived in the same kind of conditions, so I couldn't see how they were discriminated against any more than I was. But he explained at that time that there were people who couldn't get houses, and I remember saying to him, and how long do you think this will last? And he says, oh, it'll not last very long. And at that time that was the feeling. People, it was away in Derry, it really didn't concern the Belfast people. When the trouble started then in August in Belfast, it really come home, because I can remember the night the troubles broke out on the Falls Road. I happened to be on the Falls Road that night, going to visit one of the girls in work who was sick, and there was petrol bombing and I was terrified. I couldn't believe what was happening. And then when people gradually got into set patterns and got into set communities, it frustrated me that people who'd been friends for years all of a sudden seen each other differently. I could never understand that. You know, I could never understand how someone could tell you something on the television and you instantly believed it. I think you have to think for yourself. And in the early years of the Troubles, it was pretty horrendous. There was stuff going on that, you know, in all communities, and there was some very frightening stuff going on. Where I lived in Roden Street, for instance, at the beginning of the Troubles, lorries came in and took Catholic families out during the night, and you got up the next morning and there was maybe 5 or 6 empty houses in the street, and that was really frightening. There was something more sinister going on here than just somebody talking about discrimination. And so the whole fabric of the community was broke down at that time. And that's actually how I came into community work, because we seen an area that we were born and reared in falling apart. A group of trade unionists got together and formed a committee to try and save the area, try and keep the area the way it was. Perhaps at that time we were naive. We thought we could do it. We couldn't. The area absolutely disintegrated, and Protestants left and went into Protestant ghettos, and Catholics left and went into Catholic ghettos. But by and large, the people that I knew in those days have remained friendly with all these years. And I know it's a cliche, people say, well, I have Catholic friends. I have, but these are people I have known all my life. And the fact that they moved into a Catholic ghetto and I moved into a Protestant one hasn't changed that. Things changed because people got set. I mean, at the beginning there would have been, there was some possibility that the Troubles could have been settled. But after a while patterns began to form. You had paramilitaries on both sides, taking up sides within a community. You had real fear. In some cases you had real gangsterism. You had the fact that people were telling you what you were allowed to think and what you were not allowed to think. And that's one thing that really angers me, because anybody who knows me will know that I think for myself. I can't stand anybody telling me what I should believe or not believe. And it really became very frightening at that time, because it was people were drawn into themselves, and the community was turning in on itself. And by and large, even in Catholic areas where you didn't belong to that area, you were a stranger, or in a Protestant area, you didn't belong to that area. I mean, I moved to the Shankill area some 26 years ago, and there are people in the Shankill who still call me an outsider. And I suppose in a sense I still would refer to Roden Street as my home. When we moved into the area in the Shankill that I live in now, it was a beautiful area, right up against, there was no peace line then, right up against the mountain, beautiful setting, but the area had been allowed to fall into a great deal of disrepair because it was right beside a Catholic area. And many, for instance, you couldn't have got the bins emptied because bin men were allowed to refuse to go into the area. And the area, we had rats running about the area as big as cats, and people were moving out, and we were becoming, it was known at that time in the Belfast Telegraph wrote an article and they called it the ghost town. And a group of us got together and decided that we wanted to remain in the estate, and we wanted it to be a nice estate, and we wanted all the normal things. We were paying our rent, and so we formed ourselves into a residence group, and we tried to fight to get our estate updated, both in housing and environment, and to bring a little work into the area, and to bring shops into the area, and bring all normality into the area. Being involved at that stage with the group showed me a whole lot of things. It showed me that there were people who could cure their own community problems. The Troubles had rumbled on at this stage for many, many years, and people had just, it was just a way of life. And every morning you got up and you perhaps heard of the latest atrocity. You listened very carefully, and if it wasn't in your area, well, that sort of was a relief. If it was in your area, then you had to deal with it, you had to work with it, and you knew that maybe in community work you had to start from scratch again, because there were always knockers, there were always people saying we knew it wouldn't work. But by and large, that just made you more determined. And over the years, I've always tried to involve anything I've been doing with local people, because I believe there's such amount of talent in local people that they could save their own area. And cross community work, I don't like that term. I like to call it joint community work. We've worked across the peace line. Now at the moment, I live beside a huge big peace wall, and it's a physical barrier, but it's the barriers in people's minds we have to work on. And all during the Troubles you found that becoming more and more into people's minds, that they weren't going to have anything to do with the other community. Oh, we can't do nothing with them on the other side of the peace wall. And that's nonsense. People on the other side of the peace wall are just like us, and they have talents and they have plans and dreams for their future, and it made sense then to try and sort of make cross-community contact and to pull our plans together. And that's been one of the driving forces in my life, because I remember in the early 70s being on the White Rock Road and seeing a sign on a wall which said, "Is there a life before death?" Some young person had wrote it, and that really, really stuck with me, that someone of that age would be thinking, you know, you know, I'd had such a happy childhood myself, and we were taking young people's childhood away from them, and it was basically all troubles and fighting and rioting and could you blame young people for joining paramilitaries? There was nothing else in their areas, and it gave them a certain status. And we had a huge proportion of young girls becoming parents at 13, 14, 15 years of age. They were only children themselves and hardly knew how to deal with the situation. And so out of that grew a whole need to look at the area and see what we could do about it. And I was very fortunate to be involved with the early years, and very fortunate to be involved with the Greater Shankill Partnership, and that has allowed me to work on some of the projects all my life that I've been thinking about.
Lovely. I want my potty. She's a cross little girl. Say please, said the General. Daddy! I want my potty, please. That's a baby.
We're in one of the centres run by the Early Years Project. This is actually the childminding centre, and here we have a very innovative programme going on where children are brought in from as young as 3 months upwards, and the women who run this are self-employed childminders. The Early Years Project provides the facility and the toys, and the women themselves are self-employed. It's a very innovative programme for Northern Ireland, and we hope this will spread through Northern Ireland. It's very necessary, because if we want people to go back into training and education and work, we have to provide proper daycare, and that's what we're attempting to do in this centre. One of the programmes, the Greater Shankill Partnership, for who I work, they have a number of programmes, 6 of them. One of them is looking at education, and education is always, it's pivotal to everything we do. And we looked at education because education's been very undervalued in this area, and we looked at how we might break into the whole cycle and how we might add something to it. And we have worked on different levels, but one of the things that we were very keen at the time, the Chief Executive had this vision that if we were able to access real money, we should start at the very beginning. And we mean by that, start the day a child's born, or preferably before it's born. We like to work with young women while they're pregnant, and we like to support them in school, and we like to support them in getting their exams, and also have the choice of having the baby, and we like to support them on through that. Our programme is basically a home visiting programme. We employ, at this stage, we have almost 90 workers, and the majority of them would be what we call project workers, home visitors, and they would go out and visit a home, and they meet the family at the point of need. They don't go out and say you should be doing X, Y and Z. They go out and say to the family, how can we help you? And gradually they build up a trust with that family. It could be a health problem, it could be a benefit problem, it could be just simply isolation. Family just feels nobody cares, and so we try to support them. We try to get the kids interested, the parents interested in putting the children into nursery school and into to get them ready to go to school, primary school, but we also like to draw the parents back into education and training. And we have a number of centres that we put on taster sessions and then pass them on into other trainers. We don't train them, we pass them into another training organisation. And this year, for instance, in June, we had a celebration of achievement, and we had 110 parents receive certificates. Now that was a big thing, and that's ongoing. And we have local trainers now telling us that they're up to capacity with people wanting to go into further education. And that can only be good for our area, because education is the key to the future. And if we can get young people really interested in education, then we've cracked it. Because of where I was born and reared, and the formative years, there wasn't a difference. I think that made a big impact on me. And then with working within in the mill and working in a mixed religious basis in work, I think you learn to appreciate people were people, and where they went on a Sunday was their business. It was nothing to do with me, as long as it didn't interfere where I wanted to go to on a Sunday. And I think, I think just in the years that I was growing up, I learned just to value people, and that's something I have always worked for in my life. Not to take on board that somebody belongs to a party or somebody's a certain religion or whatever. People are people, and I think you find basically if you work with people on that basis that they work with you. In the last 10 years I've been lucky enough to fortunate enough to have been to America several times and seen the work that's being done there. I've been to Europe and seen the work that's being done there. I've also been very lucky that the work that I have attempted to do and do with other people has been recognised. And sometimes it's quite embarrassing when you get an honour, because I don't see it in the sense that I'm doing anything to be honoured for. Obviously other people recognise it as that, but it's nice. It's nice that people recognise what you're doing. But in the last 10 years I've had a whole new different life. So it just shows you as one door closes, another door always opens. And if we can certainly work together here, and certainly through the early years programme, just change the attitudes and change the mindsets of people, who knows what the future will be for the Shankill. I mean, we have a whole new generation coming on that are being looked at and trained in a different way, and hopefully the troubles is way behind us now, and we don't have to worry about that. And young people now will get the opportunity to actually learn all about the world outside. It's a sad reflection that some young people in the Shankill could hardly tell you where the City Hall is, because this small space of road has been their world. I would like to see our young people get a taste of the outside world. I mean, there's been a lot of people involved in the peace process, and the peace process has been going on for a long number of years. We believe that women should be at the talks, so I was one of the founder members of the Northern Ireland Women's Coalition to get women at the talks, because women are more than half the population here. And so that has been successful, and we now have had the election for the Assembly. We had a very successful referendum, and I think things are moving in the right direction. Of course there's going to be hiccups. I mean, the Troubles lasted 30 years, and we're told by other countries in conflict that it'll take 30 years for the peace process to unfold. I think we're well on our way. I think there's a lot of people who have taken a lot of risks for peace. I don't think there's any going back at this stage, and you know, I think things are unfolding at the right pace. Young people in this area would have been very fearful of going onto the falls, and vice versa. Young people in the falls would never have dreamt of going onto the Shankill Road. But slowly, through different projects, that's been broken down, and it's not something you can do overnight. Everybody, all the young people from the Shankill, all of a sudden won't want to walk down the falls, and vice versa. But it's something we're working at on a number of programmes. I'm involved in a programme that takes young people from the Shankill, young people from the falls, and young people from Tala, outside Dublin, and they train together, and they get some international training experience together, and they come back, and then it's by word of mouth. They say to their friends, people on the other side of the peace line are just the same as us. But that's one level we're working on. Another level we're working on is that if big employers ever come back to this area, all the spare land for buildings of factories will be on the Catholic side of the peace line, and so we have to work very hard in building up our own community's identity and our own community's confidence to cross the peace line to actually attain work. Again, that's happening in slow measures, but it's happening. And so that also says well for the future. And today, you wouldn't hear young people saying, oh, I wouldn't go down the falls. They might be thinking it, but they don't say it. And they're beginning to slowly think round it. And because now all the gates and all are open, I mean, for a long time during the Troubles, the isolation was very stark. There was only certain times you could cross. You had to actually go all the way around the town to get to the Falls Road. But because all the barriers are now open, it has just freed the whole situation up. In a way, if there's any incident at all, like the day of the Omagh bombing, all the gates were closed. And everybody instantly knew, even though you hadn't seen it on television, that there was something happened somewhere because they closed all the gates down. When the Omagh bomb happened, the people on the Shankill Road here knew all about it, because we had a similar bomb. We had a similar bomb here in '93, right into the heart of our community on a Saturday afternoon, and so it brought a lot of memories back for people on this road. And so it's all about communities coming together and doing what you can slowly. But I think I say this to a lot of people. I think in Northern Ireland there's been a lot of people working across the board on different issues. The business community's been working, the trade union's been working, the district partnerships has been working, and so I think everybody is like a patchwork quilt. Everybody's constructing their own little patch, and all those patches will come together, and then it'll eventually be bound round by the peace process. So I think, you know, that's the way the future will be. I think there's a lot of goodwill on both sides. Of course, there's still a lot of hiccups, and there are things we'll have to take on board and work through, and there probably will be dark days ahead, but nonetheless I think we'll have more brighter days than dark days.
What sort of problems have you had being a community worker?
Well, I think any community worker in Northern Ireland that has dared to put their head above the parapet has put themselves in the line of danger. That's right across the board. That was evident earlier this year when young Terry Enright was shot. Terry was known for a cross-community worker and was shot dead, and that probably is the extreme version of can happen. But many community workers in Northern Ireland have had their lives threatened, have had their homes dogged, have had their cars wrecked, and it's just one of those things you take on board as something that goes with the job.
Did you ever feel that you were in danger?
Yes, I've had my life threatened several times. I've had my car wrecked once or twice. But again, as I say, that's something you take on board. Obviously, as someone said to me when I was receiving a fair amount of hate mail at one time, someone said to me, you must be doing something right, otherwise they wouldn't be interested in you. And I suppose that's the way Northern Ireland has been for a number of years. But there has been people, apart from community people, there's been political people and right across the board who have taken enormous risks for peace. And I think that now that we have got a measure of peace, we will hold on to it. I suppose when you look back over your life, I don't necessarily think you would think it as contributing. I would say I've been very lucky. I've been given the opportunity to do a lot of things. Community work has been my whole life, all my life. That's just the way I am. And I'm involved in a lot of community groups. And many people say to me, where do you get the energy? I don't think it's so much energy, I think I'm nosy. I like to know what's going on, and I like to make a contribution in that sense. But I think I've been very lucky in been given the opportunity. For many years, you know, community workers talk about community development, and I suppose if you were to ask 40 community people what that meant, you get 40 different answers. To me, community development's all about people actually developing their own community. It's not about money. It's about people using their own talent, and I've been very lucky to be involved and actually see that happen, something I never believed I would. And I suppose at this stage of my life I've almost achieved everything I ever thought I would. I've been very lucky.
Windy and stormy through these early morning hours as an area of low pressure makes its way through. Wind gusts, believe it or not, up to 70 miles an hour in some places. Please watch the driving if you're out early. The greatest area of the disruption and the strong winds will be across parts of Northern Ireland and the northern parts of Scotland, even though northern parts of England will feel the effects as well. Please take some care. Temperatures fairly mild, double digits in the south, 4s, 5s and 6s as we go through the course of the day on the Monday, and rain still across the south, showers across the northern areas, but still very windy across many of the northern parts with gusts to 70. That's the weather for now.
This is BBC News, broadcasting to the United Kingdom and around the world. The headlines: trading in the new European single currency has begun on world markets. An unmanned expedition to see if there's life at the South Pole of Mars has blasted off from Cape Canaveral. And police in Israel have detained 8 members of an American Christian cult, saying they were planning acts of violence. Hello and welcome. I'm Adrian Finnegan. Europe's single currency has made its debut on the world's money markets. Traders in Australia and Asia say dealing has so far been cautious and subdued. The euro became legal tender on January the 1st, and it's expected that it could be a serious rival to the dollar as the world's leading currency.
The euro had its debut in the world's foreign exchanges at 5 o'clock on Monday morning in Sydney, Australia. The new currency is expected to increase Europe's influence in the world's economy and to eventually challenge the US dollar as the world's leading currency. Throughout the New Year holiday weekend, there have been frenzied preparations around the world to get computer systems ready to trade in the euro. Banks had beefed up their staffing levels on Sunday to witness the historic event and to tackle any potential technological hiccups. In Australia, a publisher laid claim to making the first trade in the euro, buying 5 million of them at $1.17 each.
And we've had a couple of customer deals that were done early. The bid-offer spread in the market is trading on 5 points, which is quite tight, which means that there is good liquidity for us to get support prices for our customer business. So it's a promising start.
In Tokyo, there was quiet trading in the euro, with traders cautious about piling into the new currency. However, Japanese policymakers over the weekend expressed concern that the euro could create greater volatility on the foreign exchange markets. The Japanese Prime Minister, Keizo Buchi, is expected to call for a loose grid of exchange rates among the world's three great currencies, the US dollar, the yen, and the newcomer, the euro. Tony McMahon, BBC News.
Well, after starting the trading day at around $1.16 in Australia, it's climbed steadily. In Japan, currently, the euro trading against the dollar at $1.18.2. Well, joining me now on the phone from Tokyo is Paul Abrahams of the London Financial Times. Paul, thanks for joining us. You've been on the trading floor there in Tokyo for quite some time now. Describe the scene for us.
Well, it's pretty becalmed, actually. Some of the traders got in about 2 o'clock this morning, and they started beginning tentative trades around 5 o'clock with some of the Australian traders, and frankly, a lot of them were saying it wasn't worth coming in early and they should have stayed in bed.
A bit of a damp squib as far as the start is concerned. Are they nodding off? Are they so bored? And is there any kind of atmosphere with this first day of trading?
Well, everybody was expecting something rather dramatic, and in the end it's turned out to be extremely quiet, and they were all in working on their software systems yesterday and then came back in, some of them at 2 o'clock this morning. And a couple of them are sort of nodding off, smoking cigarettes, and generally it's all been very dull. I think the most exciting thing that happened is that the loudspeaker system opened up and they started playing some traditional Japanese music to welcome in the new year here, first day of trading.
But with the launch of any new currency on world stock markets, they do something special. Have they been wearing traditional dress, as they sometimes do?
Well, not the men, but in fact every year on the first day of trading, all of the women come in kimonos and will go down to the stock exchange and there'll be a religious ceremony. But that's got nothing to do with the euro, that's just what they do. They do that every year.
Is the euro viewed in the Far East with any kind of suspicion? Of course, many Southeast Asian currencies absolutely hammered during 1998 by the Asian flu, as it was called, the economic contagion that spread the globe. Do people there in the Far East see the euro as a threat to their own currencies?
I'm not sure in the rest of Asia that it's really viewed as a threat. I think in Japan there is concern. There's been efforts by the Japanese government to try and get the yen as a more international currency. Very little trade is actually done in yen, it's all done in dollars. And there was a feeling that there ought to be a role for the yen, and that was really heightened by the realization that the euro was going to come on the scene, and because Europe is such a large trading partner and such a large economy, that it would actually be a significant competitor to the dollar. And there is a general feeling here that the yen is going to be even more sidelined and will become even more of a domestic currency rather than an international one, and there is definitely concern about that.
Okay, Paul Abrahams in Tokyo, many thanks. Well, as dawn on Monday came to the world, the first place to start trading in the euro was, of course, Australia. Earlier, I spoke to Ian Town, who heads up the foreign exchange division at Deutsche Bank in Sydney.
Well, Adrian, we had a pretty quiet start to the day. You're right. Well, the official market open is at 5 a.m. Sydney time, so we've actually been open for about 7 hours now. Very quiet start to the day. The Euro-US opened at about the 117.40 level. And for the first 4 or 5 hours, traded between 117.30 and 50. There's only really on Tokyo and Singapore's open over the last hour that we saw the move up to a high of about 118, and then it's just off those highs now, 117.90. But a pretty, I mean, you have to say, a pretty orderly start with reasonable liquidity, bid offer spreads of about 5 pips in the interbank market. Not too much client demand at this stage.
You say not too much client demand. We heard rumours here in London that one Australian publisher had bought something like 5 million euros. I mean, has there been institutional interest in the new currency?
Oh, look, there's certainly interest. There's certainly interest out there, and there's clearly been parcels going through of 4 or 5 million euro. But there's not been anything too sizable. Certainly through the first 4 or 5 hours. I think a lot of banks initially were really in to make sure that their systems were bedded down and everything was working okay.
Ian Town speaking earlier from Deutsche Bank in Sydney. Well, the euro is expected to face a big test when the European money markets open in a few hours' time. But while the traders have been preparing for a major change in the way they do business, the general public won't notice any difference. Coins and notes will not be available for another 2 years. Our European business correspondent has gauged the mood in the streets of Frankfurt.
Europe's brave new world is being given the hard sell. On the streets of Frankfurt, Germans queue up to play games designed to teach them about the European single currency. As people return to work today after the long New Year holiday, many of them will be coming into contact with the euro for the first time. All age groups are being targeted in the information campaign. 11 countries and 290 million people are sharing the new currency, a project which will force governments to coordinate their policies much more closely. European integration has taken a massive step forward.
Putting Europe together by economic ties or other ties, political ties now is very important, and getting the countries together, taking their common decisions. And the euro is a thing which really closes everything together, knits the countries together.
Many shops here are pricing their goods in both euros and German marks. For the next 3 years, it's possible to pay in euros only by credit card and cheque. Euro notes and coins will be introduced in 2002. Until then, national currencies, such as the mark, will continue to be used for all cash transactions. It's a complex start to monetary union, and there are certainly teething problems. In this big Frankfurt store, we saw one customer being told the euro didn't come into existence for another 2 weeks. This shopper tried to pay at one of the counters, but the cashier insisted the euro wasn't operating until the middle of January. But the euro is definitely here, and in bank dealing rooms it's expected to be a busy day as trading starts on the European foreign exchanges. The authorities are watching events closely. Overseas investors are understood to be keen to buy the euro. That could boost its value against the American dollar in the future. A project of this size has never been carried out before. No one knows how well it'll work, but the 11 countries taking part are now quietly confident that during the months ahead, the euro will prove itself to be a strong currency. Jonathan Charles, BBC News, Frankfurt.
Now, moving on to other news, the American space agency NASA has launched an unmanned mission to Mars from Cape Canaveral in Florida. The mission is to explore its south pole for signs of water and life. The Mars Polar Lander will take soil samples and heat them to see if they contain hydrogen and oxygen.
2, 1, we have ignition. We have liftoff of the Delta II rocket carrying the Mars Polar Lander, NASA's first visit to the red planet's southern pole.
The Mars Polar Lander was rocketed off into space from the Kennedy Space Center this evening at the start of a 40-million-mile journey to the south pole of the red planet. NASA has described this as their most ambitious mission to Mars so far. 3 weeks ago, the first part of the project, the orbiter, set out on its 11-month journey. Scientists believe that rivers once flowed into lakes and oceans on the now arid and frozen planet. They're hoping that the lander's sophisticated monitoring equipment will reveal whether their theories are right.
I think the money is on finding water on Mars, because all the results we have from Mars so far show that there has been water there in the past. And everyone, I think, in the scientific community believes that the water is still there, probably in the form of ice, certainly at the poles, but also possibly under the surface as well.
On board the unmanned landing craft is a camera and microphone to eavesdrop on our nearest planetary neighbour. Unusually, the listening device has been funded by a pressure group, the Planetary Society. They hope that hearing Mars will help people everywhere relate to space exploration. A mechanical scoop will pick up rock and soil. Earlier, 2 small landers will have detached to crash land and burrow into the ground to gather samples. They'll be analysed on board for gas and water content, and the data will be beamed back to Earth. The mission has a limited lifespan. It requires solar power, so the onset of the Martian winter after 90 days will mean the end of the polar lander. But by then, NASA hopes they'll have come a little closer to discovering the truth about life on Mars. Nick Gordon, BBC News.
Police in Israel have arrested 8 members of an American Christian cult, together with 6 children, suspected of planning a collective suicide in Jerusalem. Members of the Concerned Christians cult have claimed that their violent protest will hasten the second coming of Christ. The Israeli authorities had been alerted when members of the group went missing from their base in Denver last October.
A worldwide hunt for the missing members of the American-based cult ended in this affluent Jerusalem suburb. Israeli police raided 2 homes and detained 8 adults and 6 children, all alleged members of the Concerned Christians group. Little is known about the cult, but the Israeli authorities say they have evidence that a violent showdown and possible collective suicide was planned in a bid to hasten the second coming of Christ in time for the millennium. The group is believed to have come here shortly after disappearing from their Denver base last October. Local people had long wondered what their reclusive neighbors were up to.
You know, you could see them sitting here all day long, you know, doing nothing. The car was here, you know, throughout, and that's about it. You know, you could wonder how can they afford this house, you know, by not working or anything like that.
All those detained are expected to be deported back to the United States. The raid is the first move by a special Israeli police task force specifically set up to deal with threats linked to the millennium. It's feared that the birthplace of Jesus will be the focus of several extreme groups for whom the impending anniversary has an apocalyptic message. Stephen Gibbs, BBC News.
A bomb has exploded under a bridge in Pakistan shortly before the Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif was due to travel over it. 3 people were killed and several others injured in the explosion on the outskirts of the city of Lahore, only a few kilometres from Mr. Sharif's family estate. Police had been checking security along the road when the explosion happened. No one's admitted planting the bomb.
Bombers hoped this would be the wreckage of the Prime Minister's car on a bridge near Raiwind. Government officials say the attackers knew Mr. Sharif's plans well. He regularly makes this trip at weekends, going to his family's home less than 2 miles from here. The explosion was timed to happen as he passed, but he was delayed in the city by work. In the end, the explosion killed a policeman making security checks and passers-by and injured others, but it didn't claim the life of the Prime Minister. It was a landslide election victory in 1997 which brought Nawaz Sharif to power for a second time. He was first appointed Prime Minister 8 years ago following the sacking of Benazir Bhutto. At 49, he's a young national leader and is considered by many to be the most powerful premier in Pakistan's history. Last year, he sacked the leading general Jahangir Karamat. He'd already taken on and beaten the power of the president and the judiciary. And in October, he pushed through the National Assembly plans to adopt Islamic Sharia law. That change to the constitution has yet to be approved by Pakistan's Senate, but it has made a powerful political point. Minority groups in the country worried about the effect on their rights are among many who see Mr. Sharif as a political enemy. A crackdown to try to end the violence and crime which has claimed thousands of lives in the city of Karachi in the last 3 years has made him enemies too. Mr. Sharif is due to hold meetings in Lahore tomorrow. He's expected to keep his appointments. Today he left the city for his family home as planned, but by another route. Paul Welsh, BBC News.
This is BBC News. A reminder of the headlines this hour. The start of trading in the new European single currency begins in the Far East. The American space agency NASA has launched an unmanned mission to Mars to explore its south pole for signs of water and the possibility of life. And still to come in this news, a day in the life of a London city trader as the square mile readies itself for the euro. The United Nations Secretary-General Kofi Annan has condemned the shooting down of a second UN-chartered plane in Angola within 8 days. He's called it an outrage. 21 UN workers are now missing.